Dynasty mock draft with Heath Cummings. We're here to break down the latest mock draft from CBS Sports.com with our very own Donkey Teeth and Heath Cummings starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. Welcome to another fantastic episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Lamarco, and today we have a very special guest jumping on the show to talk about the latest Dynasty mock draft that they did on CBS Sports.com. Make sure you're going to check out the written article by Heath Cummings on CBS Sports.com or check out the link in the show notes description on YouTube. Before we do all that, we want to make sure everyone's subscribing across the board to @Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, TikTok, and IG. We have a bunch of great content coming out over the next few weeks, but make sure you're also going to razzball.com to check out all the latest articles we have for baseball, hockey, soccer, whatever you think you need, we have it at razzball.com. Before we even dive into all this, I want to bring on one of my co-hosts for today. It's Donkey Teeth. DT, what's going on?
Hey, what's happening, Bobby? Looking forward to talking some Dynasty mock draft here. Do you want me to intro this league real quick before we bring Heath on?
I would love that. So, DT, give us a breakdown of what was the format and what we'll be talking about today's show.
Yeah, so Heath put together a great group of guys for the CBS Dynasty mock. This was about 10 days ago. So, nice thing about the offseason in fantasy football is this content stays green for a little bit longer than normal. So we did this draft with all the CBS guys, a few other industry experts, and it was a one quarterback league, PPR, full point PPR, 16 rounds we went. It's 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 flex, and then 8 bench spots. So that's pretty much the format. It's not too deep in terms of Dynasty, but let's bring Heath on and talk to the man.
Yeah, so without further ado, let's bring on our guest for today, Heath Cummings. What's going on, Heath?
Thank you guys for having me. I'm looking forward to that. I think the first time I ever interacted with either of you was in a fantasy baseball mock draft about 7 years ago. So this has been a long time coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, Heath, now we wanted to get you warm up a little bit. We know you talk sports all the time. And I know if you haven't followed, what's a great follow on Instagram is Heath's Meats on IG. If you haven't followed it yet, please go do so because Heath's a connoisseur. He's a triple threat. He can talk sports, he can talk meat, and he can talk beer. So Memorial Day weekend just passed, Heath. So what was your combination go-to beer and meat combo over the weekend?
A lot of them get asked this question. I don't have a good answer from recently because I don't just eat great smoked meat and drink great beer every single day. I take a little time off occasionally, but this was an epic weekend. I had a family gathering on Friday. My grandmother was in town. I smoked a pair of pork butts, and that's kind of my go-to if I have a larger gathering, just because I can buy a large quantity of that meat and know that I won't mess it up. And then on Memorial Day, I actually had Ben Schrager, our podcast producer. It's his last week. I think tomorrow is actually his last day at CBS Sports. He came over on Monday, and I smoked a couple slabs of ribs. The ribs turned out really fantastic as well. And the entire weekend, I was drinking Civil Society IPAs. My son had a basketball tournament up in West Palm Beach, and just like 4 blocks away from the best IPAs in Florida, Civil Society. So I loaded up on those, and I'm trying to think like what the best one was. I think it was either Fresh or Juice. They're really creative with the names.
Okay. Now, listen, now I'm thinking about food instead of hosting this show, so that might be a problem. But I will get back into focus here to talk a little bit about this Dynasty mock draft. So we're excited to go through this. And first off, Heath, want to talk a little bit about your roster build. The title of the article is 0RB. Now, I'm going to run through just the first 6 or 7 picks that you made in this draft. And if you want to go check out the full rosters for Heath and Donkey Teeth and the rest of the analysts, they're all broken down on the article at cbssports.com. But let's talk about your top 5 or 6 picks because they are noticeably not running backs. So first off, CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle. You also went with Josh Allen with the 3rd pick as a quarterback, one of the first 2 quarterbacks taken. You also went Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave before taking your first running back in the 6th round, which was CEH, which we'll get to in a second. But so first off, was there a mindset going into this to do a 0RB? And if that was the case, was there a running back at one point that you were like, I hope this guy does fall in those first 4 or 5 rounds?
Yeah, I mean, there's never for me a mindset going into a mock where it was occasionally on a mock, but not on a real draft where I'm like, I'm definitely going to use this strategy before the draft even starts. But I will tell you, like, this kind of played off of the last mock that we did when Derrick Henry fell to me, I think in round 5 of the startup that we were doing, round 5 or 6. And I just felt like I had to take him. But then my next 2 picks, I took rookies. And I hated the way that tastes. I'm a big proponent of, if you're going to, like, when you're drafting a team, by the time you get to round 5 or 6, you should know if you're building a win now team or you're building a team for the future. You really shouldn't be drafting Derrick Henry and rookies in the first 5 or 6 rounds. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So after I started this draft with Lamb and Waddle, and there wasn't a running back that I wanted in round 3, I kind of decided, that's the direction I'm going to go. I'm going to build towards the future. And I wasn't going to take a running back unless it was a running back who I really thought had some longevity. I think there was one case where I was 4 or 5 picks away. Yeah, Ken Walker in round 5 went 4 picks before my round 5 pick. I would have taken Walker there if he had been there in round 5. I wouldn't have necessarily gone 0 RB, but he wasn't. And then also Marquise Brown went right before that. I believe someone on this podcast might have taken him, and I was kind of irritated by that. So those were 2 guys that I missed in round 5. And then in round 6, I was 1 pick away from getting Josh Jacobs, which would have made this entire approach, to me at least, feel much better if Josh Jacobs had been my RB1 as opposed to CEH.
You don't hear that a lot these days. If Josh Jacobs was my RB1, it would make me feel a lot better. But that's good. So, DT, kicking it over to you, you actually took a kind of a modified approach of what he did, in the sense that you took a Najee Harris at 6, and then after that, you kind of faded the position for a while. So, was there any other RBs at consideration at 6? And after you took Najee, what was your thoughts?
No, there really wasn't any others at 6 for me. I mean, I guess there's an argument for Eckler, full point PPR. But I'm building a little bit longer term in this Dynasty league. I guess philosophically, in Dynasty, we all know the turnover at the running back position, but you need that horse if you're going to contend also. So it's a weird balance where you don't want to get too invested because they've got such a short shelf life, and we know the wide receiver, their shelf life. I mean, you look at some of these guys playing into their early 30s at such a high level still. So you get like 10 years out of a wide receiver of peak performance. Running back, you get like 2 years. So, but you still need them to win. So yeah, I wanted to invest early if the right guy was there, which Najee was the right guy for me. And then because it's 3 wide receivers in this format, I mean, you really need some nice depth at wide receiver to get by in a competitive league, starting 3 wide receivers every week in a full PPR. So that was kind of the angle that I took, Bobby.
Okay, so when jumping back into, ironically, you two were the number 1 and number 2 drafters of quarterbacks, back-to-back with Mahomes and Josh Allen. So I guess kicking it down to you, Heath, what was the thought process on the Josh Allen pick in a single QB league in the 3rd round? And was there any remorse later? Because I know you ended up with another quarterback like Tom Brady much later in the draft.
Yeah, and that was like round 15. It might have been the next to last round or something when I took Tom Brady, and that was just sheerly this guy needs to get drafted in this mock draft. And like philosophically, if you're at that point in the draft, even if you don't think you're contending this year and you already have a quarterback in dynasty leagues, I saw Tom Brady get traded for a relatively early rookie pick last year by the team that won the league. So it's possible to move quarterbacks maybe easier in dynasty than it is in redraft. But no, it's the same thing that he was saying about wide receivers. Like, if there's a position that has a longer longevity than wide receiver, it's quarterback. And there are a couple of guys, Allen and Mahomes, who I think like could legitimately be top 2 or 3 quarterbacks for the next decade still. And those guys are worth a round pick to me.
So in your bold predictions show today I was watching, you talked a little bit about a guy like Jalen Hurts potentially being the number 1 quarterback. I know it's a bold prediction, right? But a player like that did go maybe 3 or 4 rounds later. So I guess my follow-up question to that would be, is it just Josh Allen and Mahomes in that 3rd round range? Any other quarterbacks you could jump into that maybe 3rd or 4th round in a startup?
I'm like, Herbert's close. And the difference for me between Allen and Mahomes, and not necessarily Herbert, because I think like Herbert's pretty safe, but all these other quarterbacks who have the same upside they do have some pretty serious question marks. I mean, not as much as Jalen Hurts about what their future is guaranteed. I don't know that Jalen Hurts has any guarantee if he just comes out and plays miserably this year, and I don't think he's going to. But he's got no guarantees of next year. Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray, who you could put in that conversation, they don't quite belong there, but they're close. They've not signed their next contracts, and I have more injury concerns about those two guys than I do about Allen or Mahomes. So no, they're in a different category for me, but Justin Herbert could join them relatively early this season.
Okay, now DT, jumping over to a different position at the tight end, you ended up taking Noah Fant in the double-digit rounds as your tight end 11 off the board, ahead of some notable guys like Dawson Knox, David Njoku, and also Trey McBride, the new rookie from the Cardinals. So what was your thoughts about Fant? Are you high on him? Is there a reason why you pulled the trigger on him in the double-digit rounds?
Yeah, I'm actually huge on Fant. I think the risk reward on Noah Fant this year is spectacular. A change of scenery could be just what the doctor ordered for him. I mean, Pete Carroll, he's always used tight end pretty heavily, going all the way back to Jimmy Graham days. Greg Olson, Luke Wilson, Gerald Everett, Will Dissly. I mean, none of these guys have the level of talent that Noah Fant does, in my opinion, other than Jimmy Graham, which he wasn't quite peak Jimmy Graham by the time he got to Seattle. So, I think part of it also is that I'm maybe more bullish than most on Geno Smith if he does end up being the guy in Seattle. I mean, we actually saw a glimmer of hope from Geno Smith last year when he came in for Russell Wilson. But I'm not going to hang my hat too much on that. It's more of a play on Noah Fant and his talent. I mean, he's just got incredible athleticism. I think just getting out of Denver is going to be great for him. This could be a huge season.
Yeah, I think he is one of the best buy low candidates, because even if Geno Smith's terrible this year, even if Drew Lock this year, there's a chance with Tyler Lockett's stage of his career that we're looking at a situation in 2023 where Noah Fant's the second option in the passing game with a very good rookie quarterback coming in. So I think there's a really good chance his value takes an uptick next year.
I guess side by side, Heath, let's jump into your tight end pick. You took Irv Smith a little bit later. In a vacuum, are you leaning Fant over Smith, or it just happened that the value came better later in the draft for a guy like Irv?
Yeah, Fant was definitely someone who was on my radar if he'd made it one more round, but I've got them back to back. Fant's 11th for me in Dynasty. Irv Smith is 12th. I think Irv Smith's another guy. It's funny how much hype he had going into last year, and the situation's pretty much the same, and there's not near as much hype. So I think he might be a top 12 tight end this year.
Gotcha. All right, let's jump to back to the running back position, because Heath, because of that zero RB approach, you leaned heavy into those later round running backs. And actually, one of your other bold predictions was that you'd have two top 24 Kansas City Chiefs RBs, and you actually drafted both CEH and Rojo. So does it sound like, what was the criteria you were looking for in those mid to late round running backs to fill up your roster?
It was one of two things. It was real youth, or guys who I thought could really increase their value this year. And I think that applies to both Chiefs backs, because if one of those guys takes 65% of the touches, then it could be great for them. But if they split it, I do like the way that I expect them to split it, with Clyde finally playing that passing downs role and that outside running role that we all thought that he would when he came into the league. And with Ronald Jones handling the stuff between the tackles and in short yardage behind a very good offensive line. So I do think they can have success together. But more importantly, I think both of those guys in a spot where their value has fallen quite a bit from where they were a couple of years ago, but have a chance to rebound. Chase Edmonds wouldn't fall into that as well. The other guys were more the younger guys, Alexander Madison, Rashad White, and there was James Cook. So yeah, it was three young guys. It was three guys who I thought could really see their value increase throughout the season this year.
Now let's jump to some of the values and reaches that we saw. And I use Sleeper ADP data to kind of get an idea of what would be a value. So DT, jumping over to you, you actually got Cordell Patterson about 38 spots lower than the ADP. So when you were drafting Cordell, were you excited about that pick? Did you think he was a value? Is that why you pulled the trigger?
I thought he was a value. I'm not going to say I was excited, but guys like him, they do seem to get devalued after a huge season. Just nobody really believes it. There could be, outside chance that he repeats, or I think there's a good chance that he returns value there, especially in a full PPR league. But no, it's more of a product of that philosophy going in of locking up the running back in the first round there, waiting, and then I just took whoever was there to, and with a strategy like this, you're going to need volume at running back and hope that you hit on a couple of those, which you can do with running back. We all know the turnover at the position. So, it was just taking what kind of came to me. And, I'm not huge on him, but I think that's a nice value.
Now, Heath, your value pick, your reach, and I don't want, and no disrespect here, but this is according to the ADPs, not my own personal rankings, was Velus Jones, actually the Chicago rookie wide receiver. So what made you take him as your last pick in the draft? Are you taking flyers on him across the board?
Yeah, I think it tells you something that taking him with the 6th pick of the 16th round is a reach. And I think that's the perception of the guy who presumably is the number 2 wide receiver for the Chicago Bears right now. I don't have a lot of hopes for him long-term ever turning into a top 20 wide receiver, but I do think he's one of those guys who comes into the league. One of the things we knock him for in Dynasty is the fact that he comes into the league older, but he also comes into the league a little bit more mature. I think he may have a chance to be a little more polished in his first season and have some success in a situation where there's not very much competition for targets. Maybe return a little value early in the year. Maybe you can flip him for maybe even a 3rd round rookie pick at this point. That would be getting a profit for next year.
So before we close out now, I want to get just one quick answer from both of you. If there was one more round, was there another player high on the list, DT, you first, that you were going to take that last round pick?
Yeah, I mean, I had to go back and pull the CBS draft room up to see who I had in my queue, and it was Laviska Shenault. So, yeah, I think that he's worth a flyer. I mean, that we know the talent's there. I think there's no bad picks. We're talking about Heath reaching in the 16th. At that point, it's the last round. Take whoever the heck pops out at you.
Yeah, and Heath, for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I did not go back and look at my my queue, so I don't have an answer for that. I was trying to look real quick at who was taken, but I see the guys taken after Jones were Corey Davis, Devontae Parker, and Kyron Williams, Jerome Ford. So there was not a lot of meat left on the bone.
Gotcha. All right. Well, before we close the show, first of all, I want to thank you for joining us today. We loved every second of this. It was fantastic to have you on. But we want to make sure that people are going to CBS Sports to check out your latest work. So do you have any upcoming articles, anything you want to promote before we close the show?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the thing I want to promote is our Dynasty Central, Dynasty landing page. If you go to the fantasy football page and you look at the top right corner, you'll see something that says Dynasty Central. And that is where we house all of our Dynasty content. 3, 4, or 5 years ago, we didn't have any. So now we've got rankings, we've got tier, we've got mock drafts, we've got mailbags, we've got all kinds of stuff. Go check it out there.
Yeah, thank you, Heath. Well, once again, this was the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. Go check us out on IG. And make sure you go to cbssports.com to check out the mock draft. Thank you once again for Heath Cummings and Donkey Teeth. I'm Bobby Lamarco. We're out of here.